Very good evening to you and a warm welcome to our program Diplomatic Faces. And today with us on Diplomatic Faces we have a very important personality who has over 25 years of professional experience in human rights, humanitarian crisis and also emergencies, and he has also been involved in management and administration of UNICEF offices in various countries, and we are privileged and honored to have with us Mr. Christian Skog, who is the UNICEF representative in Sri Lanka. A very good evening to you and a warm welcome to our program.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Pleasure to be with you.
We are privileged to have you with us on the program, and you've been involved in the same let's say the job role in Mexico previously, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
and you've
correct.
been actively involved in promoting human rights and also saving children. So today as well we'll be touching on your experience and about why you got involved in this, because UNICEF is an agency which is responsible for providing funds in terms of helping children and also on humanitarian and development aids provided to the children in various countries. And UNICEF is active in 190 countries, over 190
Yes.
countries and territories, once again involved in saving children and defending their rights. So why did you select this, being in UNICEF? What made you get into it?
UNICEF maybe selected me rather than my selecting UNICEF. But I worked for a number of years in different UN entities before, and then about 19 years ago I came into UNICEF. I was attracted to its mandate, how it was truly worldwide, as you mentioned. But also the atmosphere, the efficiency that it has, the reputation. So I think it's not a competition, but I think it's up there among the best UN agencies in terms of getting the job done. And so that's why I got in, and that's why I've stayed for such a long time.
Yes, and that's a long tenure, 19 years, and you're still very happily involved in it as well. I can see that.
Yeah.
So we spoke about what UNICEF is widely involved in, and tell us a bit about what your thoughts are on UNICEF's work since its inception, that's since 1946. How has it evolved over the years?
Well, first of all, it evolved from how it was created. It was created after the Second World War in 1946, as you mentioned, to respond to children affected by the war, particularly around health, medicines, food. But then it was fairly rapidly expanded to cover all children of the world. So that was the first evolution and expansion. And I would like to, lots of fantastic work during the 50s, 60s, 70s, but it really came together towards the end of the 1980s when the then executive director, James Grant, mobilized member states to rally around having an agenda for children and having a convention on the rights of the child. This was then finally declared by the General Assembly in 1989, and it's the reference by which, against which we work in every single country. UNICEF is mentioned in the convention as a supporter, as a body or an organization that should advise and accompany governments and countries in implementing this. And it really brought children to a different level, equal level to other human beings, subjects to rights, sort of a legal obligation on the part of the countries, of parents, to make sure that these rights are guaranteed. So that was the biggest step to considering children on par with other citizens, other human beings, and so I think that's the biggest landmark. Then lots of other major achievements, particularly progress around health, basic health, the whole immunization revolution, perhaps you can call it, that had put an end to many childhood diseases, and we've seen drastic reduction in mortality of children, of young children, continuing even now, and those are just very, very important achievements, not solely done by UNICEF, but UNICEF has been for many years and continues to be the largest buyer and procurer of vaccines in the world. So we are an important actor to get those vaccines and in the arms of and to distribute them, support vaccination systems in countries so that they function, they work. You maintain the cold chain so that the vaccines are fresh and in good quality when they get into the arm of the child. And that's probably the biggest achievements. There are many others, but that's I think what's important to highlight.
As you did mention, Mr. Skoog, that UNICEF has been very actively, involved in distributing vaccines and about immunization, and they focus a lot on children's health and education as well, if I'm not mistaken. So how and where do these funds come about, and how do you all work on it?
We have two main sources of funding. One is from the public sector, countries who give money to UNICEF, either specified for a country or for a particular program or sector, or more, which I say, overall funds to UNICEF to then decide how to spend that money. We have since 20 or so, well actually probably longer than that, but really intensified the work over the past 20 years to work with the private sector to get private sector funds. Those are both from companies but also from individuals. And the region I was working in before, Latin America, there the income to the region, to UNICEF, a few years ago, the private sector actually overtook the public sector. So that's a trend we're seeing, the private sector becoming more important in supporting our programs, development programs around the world. While there is a growth in bilateral funding as well, some of the larger scale emergency or problems require a lot of money, and UNICEF is not necessarily seeing a growth on that. So the private sector is a bit more where we're heading, I'd say.
So which means any individual who is willing to support can contact UNICEF and do the honors, is it?
Yeah, yes.
Right. And Mr. Skoog, as I previously mentioned towards the beginning of the program, you have over 25 years of experience in this field. So, and you've been working in various other countries as well before being appointed here in Sri Lanka. So tell us a bit about the global challenges children face these days, the main concerns.
Yeah, I would mention two parts. The first one is it's to make the Convention on the Rights of the Child a reality everywhere. By the way, it is the convention, the most ratified convention. Every country of the world, save for one, has ratified it. So it's everywhere. One of the key principles there, one of the overarching principles, is to give children, adolescents, a space, a voice, to take their opinion into account.
To be heard.
To be heard, and to listen to, and taken into account. Not just, oh, I'll listen to you, okay, thank you very much, and then you go on. No, to take their voice and their concerns and their opinion into consideration when you define policy or programs that affect their lives. Mm-hmm. So that we have a long way to go there. Many times UNICEF, we are forced to take on the role as the voices of children. We don't really want to do that. We have to do it, but we want the children to speak for themselves. So part of our role is to facilitate that bridge between adults, policymakers, lawmakers, and children. Because children have a very strong voice if they want to. They have very strong opinions and very good opinions and solutions to their own problems. They know much better. Instead, as adults, we second guess them. We think this is what they need without consulting them, and the result is not very good. So giving them that space and voice is extremely important. That's a big challenge. When they do speak up, and I think if there is any particular issue on which they're speaking up at the moment, it's climate change and the effect on them. it is all over the place. They are getting into Glasgow and making their voices heard.
It has gone viral.
Yeah, exactly. And with social media, it's helped a lot. But so their voice is slowly getting out there. It's an uncomfortable voice for many to listen to. The bureaucrats deciding on these things, they don't want chaos in the room.
Because they certainly don't have any other intention in mind.
Yeah. But they think of themselves and they think of their future and wait, what is the world that you're leaving for us? I mean, they're the present and the future. But so climate change is very high on their concern. And what we try to do is, as UNICEF, we try to listen. Okay, what are your concerns? Those are the concerns that we should put on the table. Those are the things that we should promote. And so climate change, what should I say, upgrading, not revolutionizing, but improving education is extremely important. Almost every child across the world wants to go to school. They want a good education, and they want to have the skills that are needed. So there are many good traditional educational systems, but many are a bit too traditional, and they need to be upgraded to the 21st century. So that's a major challenge as well. That I think that the education is really, you need to be alive, so you need to have a decent health. But education, that's the basis. That's the basis for any society. If you invest, Sri Lanka is a good example. If you invest in education, you will have a good development curve. You will do well as a country. You will have economic growth. You will have citizens that contribute in positive ways to society.
With your experience, Mr. Skog, what's the literacy rate right now like in developing countries?
Oh, it varies very much. I mean, you have a literacy rate here in Sri Lanka. Mm-hmm. In countries that have invested in education, that is close to 100%. It's in the 90% percentage. I mean, and you look at the whole population. So who are the ones who are not literate? Are the ones that are above 60, above 70, not everyone, but that's where the gaps are. You can't do much about that. But if you can get every child in school, get a decent quality education, what we care about is the population that's coming through the society, that they are literate. So that's very, very good. There have been, you talked about achievements of UNICEF. I mean, UNICEF has contributed to these achievements, and education is another achievement. But what we have really managed is to get almost every child in school. The quality is not there. That's where we need to, that's the next step.
What do you specify as quality?
You have children who go through 6 years of schooling and still don't know how to read and write and do basic mathematics. It's great that they're in school because you learn other things, around your peers, unless you're forced to be at home during COVID and you can't go to school. But so there is a lot of social development that's important. But you also need some basic academic knowledge. And when you cannot read properly, you cannot write properly, you cannot calculate properly, do basic sums and subtractions and what have you, then you have a problem, because then you're not fit to contribute to society, to make your space in society.
And even to be heard.
Yeah, even to be heard. You need to to read and write. It's important to be heard as well. We can't always speak, but even if you don't have a voice through your mouth, you can have through your fingers. So that is what we mean by quality. Then, of course, you talk about different levels of quality, going up to university studies, and we see in most countries that the university population is increasing every year. That's great. We're getting more people with higher education. As development continues, you need to upgrade the country's skills, and you cannot compete. That the countries further down the development ladder, they compete with low salaries, or perhaps many lower skilled workers. But as you move up that ladder, as you become a richer country, you need to upskill your human resources so they can compete, and your human resources quality, the quality of them, is your advantage. in a particular sector or in different sectors. So that's where why you need to constantly upgrade your educational system and make sure that your economic model grows with the times and with the world.
Exactly, and you did highlight about some of the global challenges children face these days, and it applies to Sri Lanka as well, Mr. Skog. So do you like to highlight some of the major milestones UNICEF has achieved throughout the 50 years since its inception, over 50 years since its inception?
In Sri Lanka?
Yes.
Yeah, in Sri Lanka we established an office in 1973, I believe, but even before we had an office, we worked from the India country office or sub-regional office. I think that already I mentioned 1989 actually as the milestone year globally because of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but in Sri Lanka we achieved in the same year global or universal immunization of the child, meaning that they had every child was immunized. Doesn't mean you have 100%, but everything was available. All the key vaccines were available to every child across the country, and that's a fantastic achievement and something that Sri Lanka has built on ever since. We had then there was the ratification in 1991 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, another important milestone for Sri Lanka and for UNICEF, because we work to push the countries to do this, to get to these stages. So that was key. We have had, the tsunami was a terrible blow to Sri Lanka in late 2004. Within 4 weeks, within a month, 200,000 children were back in school, having completely destroyed all the schools, but we had them back in 1 month. That was very important. Into 2005. Before that, already in the 90s, talking about childhood illnesses, polio was considered to be eradicated in 1993, so polio-free country. Again, a major milestone for the country and for the world. There are only 3 countries left with polio. Lingering for a long time, but the rest have made better. There are other milestones in terms of education and health outcomes in the region. Sri Lanka is a model still for the rest of the region. The rest of the region looks at Sri Lanka. So how did you achieve these milestones? How did you get your child survival rates to the level of any developed country in the world, any rich country in the world, by looking at prevention and a fantastic public health system. Lastly, perhaps mention the milestone in the sense of addressing COVID and the effects of COVID imposed restrictions on children, making sure that most children could continue their studies even from home, different modalities, getting support to them through the health system, getting the vaccines out there. Not only not so quickly to the children, because they don't need there are pros and cons of getting the vaccines, but also creating an environment for them to be able to continue their lives, protecting the child protection we talk about, those who are most vulnerable, to get services, to get acute services for those suffering violence or abuse at home. So stepping up to the challenge of COVID is another important milestone.
Exactly. So those are major milestones, and I think those are just to name a few, but there has been many milestones in Sri Lanka and the world over as well, as UNICEF has got involved in the immunization program, and it focuses mostly on health, nutrition and human rights of children as well. And let's also talk about the situation in Sri Lanka, Mr. Skog. Many children come from struggling families, struggling financially. So how does this affect the development of the child?
It's an important, income and poverty, and income poverty is an important factor. It can prevent you from accessing the quality services. You might not have money to go to the closest health service, or you health center. It's complicated to get there. You have to walk instead of take transport. So it can be complicated to get there. It costs a lot of money. However, it's important to realize that the Sri Lankan model, to a large extent, with public services available to everybody, overcomes a bit of that poverty. So we see that even if you're poor, you can access basic services. We have introduced at the same time, and across the world, we've been pushing for a multi-dimensional analysis of poverty for children and for adults, but not to just look at income alone. Because if you look at it a multi-dimensional way, are they poor in terms of having or not having access to some of the key health, nutrition, water, sanitation, living conditions, and to look at it more multi-dimensionally. Many times that means that there are more that are poor in that sense, but on occasion it's in systems where all of the public goods are free and the services are free. The income isn't so important. So actually they do have access even if they hardly have any money. So you can't, the income does affect you, but until many things are privatized, you're still able to access. So it does affect their ability to develop, but so far Sri Lanka has managed very well with low incomes to do much better than many other countries, richer, but that do not have the same equal access of the population to basic needs.
Mr. Skog, you did mention about how UNICEF has been involved in providing immunization during this global pandemic situation as well for Sri Lanka. So how does UNICEF intend to help Sri Lanka to develop a nutrition level among school children?
Nutrition is a big problem. And it has the malnutrition rates, or the nutrition rates have stagnated for a couple of decades. We have one of the highest wasting rates, that is weight for height in the world, number 7. And so what we are doing is, one is assessing the situation, collecting data, working with the Ministry of Health to make sure that we know what the situation is, where the more malnourished or malnutrition rates are the worst. Also doing formative research to look at consumption habits, like the nutritional habits. What do people eat? What do they give their children? At what ages? And is that appropriate or not appropriate?
This could be done from school level.
From school level, before school level. Even
Right.
starting from the beginning. You're supposed to, the ideal is to breastfeed from the beginning. Very high exclusive breastfeeding rates in Sri Lanka, which is excellent. That's the best protection and best nutrition you can get. But we know that many introduce some liquid, including Coca-Cola at very early age, which is a definite no-no. It just runs counter to what a child needs. So there are some habits that we need to stop. So doing this research on the habits, we can design a campaign and to get out there with the messages of how to change your habits. This is about preventing problems of malnutrition.
It's once again about educating them.
Educating them, yeah. But the company is not telling, hey, you need to do this, you need to do this. No, let's understand the benefits and the drawbacks of different customs, and also have the health services in their prenatal consultations give the right advice, some of the key elements communicated in the right way, so that the mother can have the right nutrition and the baby can start on the right track from the beginning.
Like everything starts at home.
Starts at home. Starts from the beginning. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a UNICEF Sri Lanka report recommends the establishment of a universal child benefit, which is UCB, as a vital step to reduce poverty and vulnerability faced by Sri Lankan families and children per se. So can you please elaborate on this and give us a better insight as to what this is and your opinion on this?
We are promoting this because many families, you mentioned the income, are struggling to meet basic needs. in countries where there is a small stipend or small grant given to all the families, that is an injection of cash to take care of some of the basic needs for the children, and we are advocating for this to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks.
How about differently abled children? Do you have anything special for them? How about differently abled children?
There are specific programs for the disabled, so that can complement the universal child benefit. We know that universal child benefit costs a lot to start with, but we're advocating for this to be done progressively. You introduce it, we've already introduced some aspects of it in a sense, in the form of the nutrition voucher that is given, or that has been given for quite some time, to pregnant and lactating women and mothers for a period of 10 months. It was then expanded to 24 months in the budget speech for this year. The budget, unfortunately, is not it's what we hoped it would be, so hasn't been implemented, but it's been decided. So that's a form to get a small, a voucher in this case, but a small voucher to every family every month to cover the needs, some basic needs for the child. That's a focus on nutrition, which is very, very, very important to start with. But there are different ways to do this. But also on the advantage of having universal benefits is that there are no exclusion or inclusion errors as such. I mean, you can talk about inclusion errors, meaning that some people don't need it, but the administrative cost to identify every family, if you deserve this because you have more money than you need, and etc.
It's basically like doing a survey.
It's enormous costs, enormous administrative cost. Better to have that go straight to the families. That's the practice in my country, my home country in Sweden. It's been in practice. You get this as a child, or the parents get it until you turn 18, and then you're on your own. But that has been a success story in many countries, and that's why we're promoting it.
Now, this question is about recruitment or use of children in armed forces and armed groups, which is an immense problem in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
So, what can UNICEF do for the rights of these children?
We have in many countries programs to attend to this. First is to say that this is, to have children involved in armed conflict and participating in one way or the other is a grave violation of their human rights. We work on prevention, talking to armed groups. It can be government forces as well, to prohibit any or to discourage them, or to really to avoid recruiting child soldiers, as we call them. And then if they are there, we are also trying to convince them to let them go, to have them go to school instead. There are rehabilitation programs to overcome the scars that this creates. It's horrendous, the effect on the child's brain, what they are doing, what they are forced to do. Because they're forced to do it. They don't do, okay, someone comes and says you'll get $20 a day if you do this, and if you go to school you're not going to get anything. It's a hard choice, but if you don't do it, we're going to get you and your family. So you often not, there is no choice. So we're working on rehabilitation. There are transition centers, so that they get a period with specific support, psychological support, but also where they can start to get back into some sort of normal life. Schooling is extremely important as a routine, something positive. And if you ask any child soldier or any kid around the world, they want to go to school. They almost universally, they want to go to school. They want to, and so the sooner we can get them back into that, the better. So there are many programs in many places to reduce the numbers and to take care of the children, putting the child at the center, putting their interest first. That's a core element. It's the first element of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Always look to the best interest of the child.
And Mrs. Skog, nearly 1 in 10 children world over are subjected to child labor. So what's UNICEF's role in helping these children come out of it?
One is to prevent them from going there in the first place.
Okay.
prevention is so much cheaper than responding. So it's to preventing through laws, raising the minimum age of work. Usually, I mean, internationally, what it should be allowed is 16 when you can start to work, but normal work shouldn't be until 18. So you should be excluded from any hazardous or heavy work, because otherwise you're not mentally fit, you're not physically fit. So we need to balance that. Doesn't mean children can work a little bit on the side here and there to get some money for themselves. So but that's okay. And it shouldn't affect their schooling. They should be in school. So prohibiting is one, discouraging, even if there isn't a law, or if there is a law, to discouraging companies from, or any employer from, recruiting children to child labor. Having data on this, we work with ILO, the International Labour Organization, to highlight what the situation is, and to work with the private sector particularly, to see how can they overcome this. It's not very easy if it's really ingrained in society. Everybody wants a child to contribute to the family household. How can you do that? Well, you can support the families so that the kids can go to school, but it's not an income loss for the parents, for the household during a transition period.
It's basically like working on a grassroots level.
Yeah, very much. But also having the benchmark there as the law, that this is what's acceptable and what's not acceptable.
Exactly. And Mrs. Skog, Sri Lanka, as you mentioned, has been very successful in reducing mortality rate and also access to proper nutrition over the years. So how do you see these achievements which has happened in Sri Lanka so far? Yeah,
no, I think that what the Sri Lankan model, I mean, I remember when I was studying more on the economic development side, that Sri Lanka stood out as one of the tigers of Asia, of the world, but the four were in Asia, because it managed to do very well economically and invest the money wisely. Invest in public health and education as sort of basis. Keep more people alive and educate them. Because then, as we said before, education is the basis for a successful society. So that has been the very summary way of describing the model.
In a nutshell.
Yeah, in a nutshell. But that's why they have such good health outcomes. Nutrition is an issue that they have been disregarding too much, because it hasn't improved. It improved in the 80s and the 90s, but it hasn't really improved since. So we need to go the last mile on that one, and then continue to invest and to keep up the health system, the services, and the same with the education. Not to lose ground. We can't be stuck in the 80s and the 90s. No, we're in the 21st century, and they need the skills. The health services, I think in general, is doing quite well. We saw it in the COVID response, how quickly, probably quicker than any other country in the world, Sri Lanka was able to roll out vaccination, because it's there. The system is there, and it can function fantastically. So that needs to keep on going. And this is a problem with the crisis at the moment. We need to safeguard essential spending in the social services, because otherwise everything is going to crack.
Exactly, and we've come towards the latter part of the program as well. So finally, Mrs. Skog, you hold a master's degree in economic development, and you also have a bachelor's degree in quantitative economics. So this question would be very vital for Sri Lankans as well right now, because we are facing an economic crisis. So what's your advice on this current crisis, to overcome the current economic crisis as a specialist in this field, and also how is this affecting the children?
We, taking the last bit first, the children, I mean, what we're seeing at the moment is continuation of what happened during COVID. Children locked up at home to a large extent, not able to see their friends, having to continue their studies in one way or the other, but not at 100%. Mental stress and mental issues, not only children, but the general population. More violence at home, more abuse at home, so more children requiring support and protection. So these things are happening and continuing to happen as the households are struggling to cope. Obviously, the country needs to get back on its feet with an economic or financial management,
Exactly.
manage its debt, manage it, the public finances in an appropriate way. What is the positive signs or the positive sides here is that the IMF is hailed as a rescuer. It's an important actor. It's not the panacea, but it's a very important actor. The IMF, contrary to what it was 20, 30 years ago, has social protection in there as a major pillar of their support to a country. So, and they want to safeguard also the social services. So that's what we are. That is the solution. That's part of the solution. To balance, you need to generate more income. You need to work on your taxes. You need to manage the debt out there. But at the same time, you cannot just say, okay, so let's not spend anything on social services. Then you're going to generate many other problems. So you need to balance that. You need to have the minimum spending in the key social services. And actually, Sri Lanka has a pretty low no spending. So we're a bit concerned about low spending, but it's a pretty efficient spending. They're focusing not on spending all the money on tertiary care. They're focusing on the public, on the preventing side very much. And that's a recipe for success. So they need to continue that. We need to balance that, get the finances in order, but keep an eye, a very close eye on the social sectors. And then I think Sri Lanka will, although going through a very, very difficult time, and it's going to be a very difficult time, they will come out stronger and resist shocks in the future much better.
Thank you very much for that advice as well, Mr. Skog, and it was a pleasure having you on the show.
Pleasure to be with you.
And with thank you very much once again. And with that, we conclude Diplomatic Faces this week, and we'll see you next week with another diplomat on our program. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a pleasant evening.